to 1111 Downtown. I'm Tom McDermott, and glad to be with you. This is trying this old camera out to see how this works, and if this doesn't add a little interest to our morning welcome, take a moment to register your attendance there beside the screen. You'll see some spaces for that. Also an opportunity to give online if you'd like to do that. We so appreciate the support. This summertime is kind of a lean time for our ministries. Also, if you're with us for the first time, I want to send you one of these things, our new Tumblr, and it is, if you'll give us your contact information, your address, we'll send you one of these. We're so glad you're visiting with us. Also, if you're on Facebook Live or one of the watch parties, please say hello, just in the comment section so that we know you're with us. And we've been enjoying the conversations that we have, kind of creating a little bit of community while we're isolated as we are. Coming up on Monday is our third Crafting Difficult Conversations between myself and Daryl Parker, and invited guests that we bring in from 7 o'clock to 7:45, 8 o'clock, and we have a chance to look at some of the difficult kinds of topics, some of the hot button issues that we're facing right now. How do we cross over this difficult territory and have engaged and meaningful conversations? So I hope you can join us for that. It's always interesting and always great conversation and participation afterwards. It's different every Monday night, so join in with us if you can. You'll find the information there, or else go to the website, fumcfw.org, and look for it there. So I'm so glad that you're with us. Let's begin our worship.
Hi, everyone. I'm inviting you into this brief meditation on words. I'm calling it Word Salad. I'm thinking about how we offer up our word salads to meet the various scenarios of our lives. And I wonder, what if we decided that the art and work of asking questions was more delicious than the answers we so quickly slap on the table? And what if we took those static sound bites, those mantras that pass for common wisdom, and we bent their edges and looked under their corners to learn what they're really made of? How would it be if we all decided to question our assumptions, gently, with grace, so that seeing more than just left or right, this or that, could be an appealing and infinitely interesting direction to take? And what if prepositions need to dangle? For instance, the woman won't come in. What if we slowed down our response before stating our certainty about why she's out there in the first place? Words, the powerful physical substance of our conversations, they are said to be world-making.
Sunburned hot, burned my eyes, burned so hot I thought I'd died. Thought I'd died and gone to hell. Look for the water from the deeper well. Went to the river, but the river was dry. I fell to my knees and looked to the sky. Looked to the sky as the spring rain fell. Saw the water from the deeper well. Well, the water from the deeper well. Well, the water from the deeper well. Ready for the blood and ready for the blood. Ready for the wind, ready for the bell. Looking for the water from the deeper well. I found some love and I found some money. Found that blood would drip. And I had a thirst that I could not quell. Looking for the water from the deeper well. Looking for the water from the deeper well. A deeper well. Well, I did it for kicks and I did it for fame. Did it for loss understand, and I did it for need, and I did it for love. Addiction stayed on type of love. So I ran with the moon and I ran with the night, and the three of us were tanks. To the battle, to the gun, to the cell, to the bottom of a hole of a deep blue. For the water from the deep blue well. For the water from the deep blue well. So I rocked with the cradle and I rolled with the rage. Shook those walls and I rattled that cage. Took my trouble down a dead end trail, reaching out a hand for a hole you'll play. Did you carry that load? Did you tell your baby about the bandit? The rebel who yelled about the one that fell, looking for the water from the deep blue well. Looking for the water from the deep blue well. Looking for the water from the deep blue well.
Good morning. I'm Reverend Linda McDermott, and I want to welcome you to the 1111 downtown service. So good to have you with us today. As you notice, my partner, Tom McDermott, who is the pastor of this 1111 service, is not with me today, as normally is. We've been having a dialogue sermon going on here for a couple of weeks. Right at the last minute, as we were getting ready to record, Tom got sick. It's not COVID. He's going to be fine, but he's just not up to recording right now. And so I know that you're going to be gracious and patient, considering that I had about 30 minutes to put something together to record so that we would have a service this Sunday. So thank you for your tolerance right now. Tom will be back next week. He's going to kick off his new sermon series. It's going to be called Interesting Times, 6 Virtues to Bring Hope and Interest to Times That Seem Otherwise. These certainly are times that seem otherwise. So I know he's looking forward to being back with you. So the topic today is going to be completely off topic from what you might have been expecting to happen this Sunday. I want to start off with a story from Genesis. It's found in Genesis chapter 11. It's a story of Abraham and Sarah and Hagar. Hagar, the character that often gets overlooked in this story of our ancestors. The first 11 chapters of Genesis has really been the considered prehistory stories. And what we've seen is from the Garden of Eden through the Tower of Babel, through Noah and the flood, we just keep seeing the beautiful shalom of God it's just being unraveled. It's just fallen apart. It's in human hands, it's just not working. And so from this prehistory, broader perspective of all humanity, it's as if the camera lens is now narrowing down on a particular story. So we open the whole covenant history with the story of Abraham and Sarah and the covenant that is made. God says to Abraham, I will make of you a great nation, as numerous as the stars in the night sky. And your offspring, this great nation, they will be my people, I will be their God. And here's the commissioning, so that they might be a blessing to all the other nations of the earth. In other words, they are to help bring about shalom, the chosen people, not chosen to be pampered or special, or above or superior, but chosen with a mission to help bring about shalom. Now, here's the promise, the great nation. We've heard all of that. And numerous offspring. So obviously, the first thing Sarah and Abraham have to do is have a child. Let me read you the opening lines to their story. And Sarah was barren. It strikes me kind of funny. Sarah's barren, but this is going to be the father and the mother of a great nation. That's a problem. She's not childless, as in not yet. She's barren, as in not ever. She's old. She has gone through all the hot flashes. She's beyond all of that now. She's beyond the childbearing years. Why God chose them and not some younger, more physically fit couple, I don't have an answer for that. But she's barren. So, obviously, with this problem in mind, rather than maybe take it back to God or trust that it's God's issue and not theirs, no, they decide they're going to get involved and try to come up with a solution for God. So what they do in desperation, and I don't know about you, but whenever I've tried to make decisions based in desperation, major life decisions, that's not been the best time. They make this decision out of a sense of desperation. What they do, which is perfectly legal and not very uncommon at that time, they take the slave of Sarah, and that slave is given to Abraham so that she would become pregnant, and her offspring would then be considered the legitimate heir of the father, the legitimate son of the legal wife. So this was legitimate. This wasn't illegal or something illicit. It was fairly common practice. You can see why they decided to do that. It made sense. It made sense. So what they do exactly what they had planned, and Hagar gets pregnant. They should have been happy. Well, I guess Abraham was. But as soon as she becomes pregnant, Hagar apparently began to see herself differently. She began to see herself more like the second wife. And Sarah didn't like that. She didn't like it at all. She was very angry about it. She regretted the whole thing. So one morning over breakfast, she looks at Abraham and she says, "Abraham, we have a problem and it's your fault." And being no idiot, Abraham says, "Look, just you do with her whatever you want to do, okay?" So Sarah goes out, and she's very cruel to Hagar. She really tries to take her down a notch or two, and she's not just unkind, she's cruel. So cruel, in fact, that Hagar flees into the desert. She would rather risk her own death and the death of her unborn child than have to face Sarah and her cruelty. Now, she goes out into the desert. She's kind of a defiant and determined young woman, but a couple of hours in the hot desert sun with no water, and she is overwhelmed. She begins to cry, and she laments all that she has done. And you think about her situation, she had no options here. She has no voice. She's a slave. But it says God heard her cry. And God says to her, "What troubles you, Hagar?" And God says to her, "Hagar, return to your mistress, and I will not forget you. Your own descendants will be numerous, and I will make of you a great nation." Now, I want you to freeze frame that for just a minute and see what's really going on. What God has done is repeated almost exactly the same covenant that was made to Abraham. There is no mission attached to it, just a promise that she would have offspring as numerous, I guess, as the stars in the night, as Abraham was. Also notice that nobody else so far, and if you'll pay attention, nobody in the coming chapters, nobody refers to her by her name except God. God calls to her. God hears her crying and calls out to her. So, as the story goes on, Hagar does return back to Sarah and Abraham. She gives birth to this child, who is the legitimate first heir, firstborn of Abraham, and names him Ishmael. Time goes by, and these figures, maybe angels, come and repeat the promise to Abraham and Sarah that they will have a child. And Sarah overhears this again, and she begins to laugh. And so when she does get pregnant, and she does give birth to a child, a boy, they name him Isaac, because they are so happy. They name their child what means laughter, Isaac. Now, what is customary at this time is because infant mortality rates were so high, people didn't really celebrate a newborn. They waited until the time of weaning. So it's about when Isaac is about 3 years old that they have this big party for him. And so at this party, Sarah notices that Ishmael and Isaac are playing together, and they're having fun together. And this old bitterness, this old jealousy rises up in her again. And she calls over to Abraham and says again, Abraham, we have a problem. You need to get rid of that slave woman and her child, and because that child will not share in the inheritance with my son. So once again, Abraham does as Sarah asked of him. He rose the next morning early and gave them a little bit of water and some bread for the journey, and sent Hagar and his firstborn son out into the desert a second time, knowing that their chances of survival are almost nothing. She left without direction, she left without hope, and this time she doesn't get very far before she collapses and she's weeping again in desperation. But this time she doesn't call out to God. Would you? She knows that she's going to die, and she doesn't want to watch her child die. So she takes Ishmael and puts him under the shade of a bush, and she goes away and goes somewhere else to die. And it says that God heard their crying, and God called out to Hagar a second time, Hagar, what troubles you? And when Hagar opened her eyes, she saw before her there fresh water, life-giving water in the desert, and she drank it, and she gave water to her son. And God did make of Hagar a great nation, the nation of Islam. Now, that's the story, and I want to ask you this question. Does this story bother you? It bothers me. Abraham and Sarah, these great ancestors of our faith, they don't come off looking so good. I don't really like them. Do you? 2 or 3 times during this story, we want to shout at them, would you just stop? Would you leave well enough alone? You're blaming the victim. You need to take responsibility for your own choices. Maybe you need to go back and talk to God. Be nice. It's funny how we can so easily see when others mess up. I can. Here's the deal. Abraham and Sarah invested in a promise with God, and then they tried to fix things. They made a decision based on fear, and they became not simply unfaithful, but downright unkind, unmerciful, and unjust. But what is really remarkable in the story is that it remains at all. Those who were canonizing the Hebrew scriptures left this story in there of the father of our faith, warts and all. They didn't clean it up before canonizing it. And you wonder why. But you know what? What I find remarkable in this story is that there is only one character in the story who comes off looking good. We know it's not Abraham. He comes off looking weak. He's done several things before this story begins that shows that he's not being real faithful to that covenant agreement with God. Certainly not Sarah. She doesn't come off looking good in this story at all. And not even Hagar. because she actually doesn't have her own voice. The only person, or the only character in the story who comes off looking good is God. Now, it's not the first time that humanity has failed God, and God remains good, merciful, loving. That is God's nature. Look back in the prehistory stories of Adam and Eve. They took matters into their own hands, messed with the plan, and got themselves into a position where they couldn't remain in the Garden of Eden, that garden of perfection. They were banished. But notice, rather than staying in the Garden of Eden and starting over, as the story is told, God goes with them. God reshapes the story and goes east of Eden with the beloved creation because love trumps perfection. And here is God failed by humanity once again, by Abraham and Sarah. Yet God will take their mistake, their very foolish mistake, and reshape that story. God stayed with Abraham and Sarah. The covenant remained. The promise, the mission, nothing changed. But God reshaped the story so that it now included Hagar and Ishmael. Remember, they were never supposed to be a part of this plan that God had. But when she was brought into the story, everyone else was willing to abandon her, to discredit her, to forget her, to let her die. Everyone but God. God made the plan bigger so that Hagar and Ishmael would not be victims. So, what are some of the lessons we get out of that? I think for me, it's that God's overall desires for shalom, for all of the creation, all of us to be healed and reunited with the whole understanding of shalom, that will be thwarted, but it can't be destroyed. So even though God's desires might be thwarted, shortchanged, complicated, made messy, imperfect, not what was planned, but they would never be destroyed. You know the famous saying of Yogi Berra when he says, if there's a fork in the road, take it. Well, you know, a lot of times we do take the wrong route. We take the wrong road because we make mistakes. We have feet of clay. Sometimes we panic. Sometimes we're short-sighted. Sometimes we just don't have our own best interest at heart. We make wrong decisions. But I wonder if we look at the way God can act in terms of embracing the story and making it bigger, I wonder if maybe there isn't one right road, and once we get on, or wrong road, and once we get on it, that's it. But perhaps the right road is simply the road we're on. Maybe it's more that wherever we find ourselves, God is there. Imagine this, that God is there laying out before us brick by brick, in response to our own steps, even our own mistakes, a path that can bring us to where we belong, which is the path to shalom. Brick by brick, as we make our own journeys and mistakes, God continues to open up the path to shalom. So what we have here in the story of Abraham and Sarah is not the story of an unwavering perfection of those who were called by God, Abraham and Sarah. We don't have a story of unwavering faithfulness, but we do have a story of the always faithfulness of God and God's love, the constancy. A God in these stories who is always for us, a God who journeys with us wherever we find ourselves, a God who remains faithful to us because we are loved, because it is God's nature to be gracious, always. It is God's good pleasure to love us. And as Jesus said, it is God's good pleasure to give us the kingdom, which is the kingdom of shalom. We're loved. Now, you and I we may recognize the wrong roads that we've traveled in our lives. Maybe they continue to affect you. Maybe those wrong choices have even been thwarting your steps now with things like guilt or shame or regret, even bitterness. Or you may recognize that you're on the wrong road even now, and you really don't know how to get off. But all roads can lead to God. We have to trust that. Even our mistakes can still lead to God, because that is the way God will have it. And God will never leave us, and God will never give up on us. For down every road, God will offer us grace and a way to shalom, always. I hope that gives you a sense of hope and a sense of comfort, regardless of the mistakes you have made or the mistakes that you're experiencing right now in your life, knowing that God never abandons, that hope always abides, and that God will bless by calling us to be God's people always. So blessings to you. Shalom.
High time we made a stand and shook up the views of the common man in a little train. Rides from coast to coast. DJ's the man we love the most. Could you be squeaky clean? Smash every hope of democracy. It's the headline. Says you're free to choose. There's egg on your feet.